Hello, Scrufftards and Vatniks. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And despite Russian reinforcements having reached the Kursk Oblast, I will try and explain why Ukraine still has the advantage. So, what is Ukraine's objectives? It's been a bit in the dark, to put it mildly. But we have an interview in Newsweek with Ukraine's foreign ministry spokesperson, Hiori Tiki, or yeah, something like that, who said that the incursion aims to prevent Moscow from sending reinforcements to Donetsk and disrupt Russian logistics and cross-border attacks. And if this is true, if this is the case, it seems to suggest that Ukraine has no intentions of leaving Kursk Oblast anytime soon, and that Ukraine expects Russia to allocate large amounts of manpower to counter the incursion, which could explain why we have reports of Ukraine building defensive positions within Kursk Oblast. And taking a look at the Ukraine control map, here we can see we have a bunch of Russian formations in place, motor rifle brigades for the most part. You have some airborne units over here, some marine elements as well have been deployed to help out the defense. And well, this thing here is rather interesting. I thought Ukraine would make a flanking move. I thought it would go up here, through here. This might be an indication of that, I don't know. But they most certainly did a flanking move, and they did it down here in the south. And this is quite interesting because this is an area where you have a lot of highways coming in from the south, through which Russian reinforcements could potentially arrive from. And if we take a look at these dots in a moment here, where I'll show you why this is actually going Ukraine's way at the moment. And likewise up here we have Ukrainian maneuvers, and we'll take a closer look at that as well. So highlighting this unit here at Budycha, that is this unit here, or Kosyrovka, so it's this formation, identified as the 15th Piatnashka Brigade, likely battalion sized, estimated max 500 men. And if we take a look at what Center for Defense Strategy said the other day, Russia has deployed some 10 to 11 battalions in this area. And here we have an estimate for what a battalion-sized element is, roughly 500 men. Estimating Russian forces in the area is a bit difficult because a Russian battalion, according to some sources, is 400 men strong. Others say it's 800. But here we have another number, 500. So if we have 10 battalions, 500 men each, that's 5,000 troops. Others say it's 800 men per battalion. So we have a rough estimate that Russia has some between 5,000 to 8,000 troops in the area. And likewise, the estimated Ukrainian strength is 10,000 troops based on the units involved and the manpower they would have if they were at full strength. So 5,000 to 8,000 Russian soldiers have been deployed to counter potentially 10,000 Ukrainians. Taking a look at another interesting location, it is this dot up here. Geolocated Russian forces ambush Cougar and Cossack MRAPs near Safanovka, right? So Ukraine has made a push out this far, and we have confirmation of Russian forces engaging the Ukrainians up here at this location here. So Ukraine is quite clearly maneuvering in the gray zone here, putting pressure on Russian forces here in the north. And now for something really interesting, going down south to this flanking maneuver, and it is this dot here, as you can see here, this one. All of these are destroyed Ukrainian vehicles or captured Ukrainian vehicles. Russia has had some success, unsurprisingly, as Ukraine has pushed in. The Russians are there to hold and defend their own country, so they will be firing back, and they have destroyed quite a few Ukrainian vehicles as Ukraine has pushed in to these smaller towns. But then you have this dot here on the 14th of August. And take a look. Russian forces fleeing Belitsa in civilian car picking up a conscript on road out of Belitsa. Belitsa, Ukraine pushing in, having lost a lot of vehicles doing this maneuver, and now we have Russian forces fleeing, confirmed geolocated, leaving Belitsa. Very interesting. Ukraine is having success down here in the south, pushing in to Belitsa, outflanking Russian formations. And why is that so interesting that Ukraine is pushing into Belitsa down here? This is Belitsa, where you have Ukraine pushing in. You can see here on the Andrew Perpetua map that they are pushing out towards Belaya as well. Why is this important? Well, you have the highway system here. Take a look. Highway system here that then moves down this way. And if we zoom out, using Andrew Perpetua's map, you can see here how this highway leads all the way down to Belgorod. And this is where Ukraine, or not Ukraine, where Russia can move in reinforcements from the Kharkiv front towards Kursk Oblast and the front line here, this eastern flank. And now Ukraine controls the supply route that Russia would have to use to reinforce the troops up here, these units, right? So now Russia will have to either punch their way through Ukrainians here, or move around and come in this way. And they don't have all that many options making this maneuver to reinforce these troops. Because there we go. Sorry, I forgot about the marker. Because then they would have to go north and come down this way. And down here you have smaller country roads leading into all of these valleys and forests. And then they can begin to move in supplies and reinforcements to these troops located here. So by moving in here, Ukraine has cut these troops off from reinforcements from Belgorod and Kharkiv, unless Russia brings them in the long way around, which obviously slows down reinforcements, slows down logistics, and Ukraine is now in a position to potentially continue northward, outflanking the Russian forces and forcing them to fall back to avoid being outflanked or encircled. And if we take a look at some reports from ISW from the 13th of August, we can see here a prominent Russian mill blogger, former Storm Zed instructor, claimed that Russian military command is redeploying operational reserves from the Kharkiv direction, like I talked about, like I've been talking about in all my Kursk videos, and other unspecified directions where Russian forces have achieved limited success. Basically all over the place except for the Pokrovsk campaign. But obviously the Kharkiv direction, those forces are the closest, and they have had little success trying to push south from Belgorod into the Kharkiv Oblast. Yes, and as it also says, Russian military command may have redeployed unspecified units that were previously intended to relieve or reinforce frontline Russian units at Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, or Pokrovsk, which could affect Russia's ability to sustain the tempo of its offensive operations in western Donetsk Oblast in the medium term. Yes, sorry. And we have redeployed conscripts, elements of the northern grouping of forces, select units from less critical frontline areas in Ukraine, would suggest that the Russian military command has determined that possible disruptions to the offensive operations in northern Kharkiv Oblast and other less critical frontline areas are an acceptable risk to adequately respond to the Ukrainian incursion in Kursk Oblast. So again, Kharkiv, they are moving troops from Kharkiv, sensibly so, to counter the incursion into Kursk. And I mean, I pointed this out for several days that this would happen. Here you have the Kharkiv front. You see a massive concentration of Russian forces, something like 45,000 to 50,000 troops. And they are, I mean, having zero to very little gains against the Ukrainians. I mean, take a look. They have made almost no headway at all in all the months that they have been attacking from Belgorod into Kharkiv. And take a look at what Ukraine has achieved in a week. Why would Russia keep pressuring the Kharkiv front with all of these troops? They will obviously start moving them north to help the territorial defenses and the rifle brigades to counter this very successful incursion. So, and we now have it somewhat confirmed from sources within Russia as well. So, how many men will Russia need to kick Ukraine out of Kursk? Uh, this is something that appears to upset the Vatniks that finds my videos, the pro-Russians. Obviously, I made this video a couple of days ago. Russia cannot retake Kursk territory without accepting defeat somewhere else, and that really upset the Vatniks. Oh my God. So I'll try and explain it for all you pro-Russians out there that happen to watch this. So, if Ukraine has 10,000 troops, how many men will Russia need in a meeting engagement, out on a field, in a forest, on a hill, whatever? Well, you usually say you need a 3-to-1 advantage when you're going on the offense. Obviously, if you only have 20,000 troops, you do what you can with those. If you only have 12,000 and facing 10,000, you do what you can with 12,000. But you want to try in any given firefight to have a 3-to-1 advantage, because this allows you to have superior numbers or superior firepower even that can pin an enemy in place, and then you can use your superior numbers to outflank him and force him to relocate, because if he stays in place he will now be outflanked and outgunned and will get killed. So he has to make a decision, and more than likely he will retreat because he is outgunned and outflanked. And also, since you are on the offensive, you run a great risk of getting shot and killed, because you are actually on the move, moving from cover to cover, and you are exposed between as you move, right? Meanwhile, the enemy is in cover, shooting at you as you're moving from cover to cover, being exposed. So you will take casualties. And with a 3-to-1 advantage, you can take those casualties and still be successful. So if one unit gets destroyed, you still have troops that can pin, and you still have troops that can outmaneuver and what have you. So that is why you want the 3-to-1 advantage. And it all comes down to creating the kill box. And I'm sure if you watched Hollywood movies, you have heard the term the L-shaped ambush, and that is basically what this is. The kill box. You outflank the enemy and shoot at him from multiple locations. And this is applicable to every level of combat. I mean, 3 individual soldiers versus 1, 3 platoons versus 1 platoon, companies versus 1 company, battalions, brigades, armies, corps. Every level of combat tries on the basic level to create the kill box. So during maneuvers, breakthroughs, and even blitzkrieg, it all comes down to the kill box. If you have large formations fighting, you try in blitzkrieg fashion to punch through, to threaten to encircle the enemy, outflanking him, and basically creating the kill box, right? So this is the most basic thing in combat. So if Ukraine has 10,000 troops, Russia would need 30,000 troops to conduct this absolutely most basic maneuver in combat, the kill box with the 3-to-1 advantage. Right, so moving on, I hope that makes sense to all pro-Russians out there. I hope you're on board. You now understand the basics of the rudimentary basics of combat. So now let's turn things up a notch. 10,000 Ukrainians. How many men will Russia need if you go up against prepared defenses? Right? The 5-to-1 advantage. If the enemy is in prepared defenses, and this could be a trench line, a foxhole for all, to be honest, or a concrete building out on a field. Prepared defenses that can offer the enemy an advantage. Then you need, according to, like I've said in a couple of videos now, conventional wisdom, 5-to-1 advantage, because all your firepower can't reach the enemy because he is in good defensive position. Most of your fire will not hit him. Meanwhile, you are still attacking, like I said, moving from cover to cover as you're trying to advance on him, and he can shoot at you accurately as you are exposed moving from cover to cover. Meanwhile, your own fire is less effective because he is situated in prepared defenses. Also, there is the problem of prepared defenses, usually involving choke points. Right? So if you go into a trench line, the entire trench line is now a choke point, right? So even if you have a 5-to-1 advantage, you're now shooting at the enemy with one or two guys at most, and he's shooting back at you and being in good cover, in a good position. So you will take a lot of casualties as you're trying to push in towards him to kill him. So you need the 5-to-1 advantage in these choke points to be able to take casualties and still have enough troops to push in and win the firefight. So you need the 5-to-1 advantage to fire at the enemy where he is, because most of your fire will be ineffective because he is in a well-defended position. And then as you move in closer, you need the 5-to-1 advantage because he will be in a good spot to kill even more of you than in a regular firefight. So you will lose more guys as you're pushing in trying to kill him. And then you have the last but very vital problem of fields of fire. So you're trying to move in on this guy with all your troops, but these are prepared defenses. So every piece of terrain is pre-sighted. So when he's opening fire on these guys, he's telling his friends that we have enemies at this and this location, and they will know how to adjust mortars, artillery, missiles, and whatever to hit with pinpoint accuracy, because everything is pre-sighted. And you usually also have machine guns and the tank-guided missiles and what have you in good support positions to help units that are further closer to the front line. And in this day and age, you also have drones obviously flying around all over the skies doing their thing. So, you know, you have this entire situation. And all you pro-Russians out there, remember how Ukraine failed in its offensive of 2023? That was because of this. All of this stopped the Ukrainian offensive in 2023. So if Russia wants now to throw Ukraine out of Kursk, Russia has to face all of these problems. And so the 5-to-1 advantage going up against prepared defenses, 10,000 Ukrainians, Russia would need 50,000 troops, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay, so now we've covered fighting out in the open, out in the forests, and fighting against prepared defenses, trench lines, foxholes, and the and small buildings and what have you. That gives the enemy an advantage. So let's turn things up a notch even still, and let's take a look at urban fighting. And in an urban environment, you need a 10-to-1 advantage in order to overcome the enemy. So if you have enemies inside of a building, for every enemy in that building, you need 10 soldiers of your own to go in and hunt them down and kill them all. And why is that? Well, it's basically because in an urban environment, you have prepared defenses all over the place. Concrete buildings are essentially bunkers. So an urban environment is just a massive bunker complex, right? So you can open fire at the outer walls, and sure, you may kill the guys behind that wall, but that's just one room in this massive building that has hundreds of rooms. So okay, you take fire in that outer room, you just walk back into another room, and you're safe. And when the fire stops, you can move back to the windows and open fire out again and stuff like that. So every building is a bunker. You have choke points all over the place. Every street, every valley, every corridor within a building is a choke point, just like in a trench line. You are funneled into kill zones where the enemy can have 2 or 3 guys holding off 20 to 30 enemies, just because it's a narrow narrow alley, or a street, or a corridor between rooms inside of a building. And rooms, obviously, like I said, every room is a small bunker, is a small foxhole, is a pillbox, right? Defensive positions all over the place. Every room, every window, everything like that is a defendable position. And then you also have elevated positions. Every rooftop, every floor with a window is a point where you can get shot at by snipers, machine guns, RPGs, and what have you. And last but not least, tunnels, sewers, subways, maintenance tunnels, and what have you, that an enemy can use to move in and attack you from behind, or set up bombs and what have you, explosive devices, and detonate as you're moving across the street and what have you. And if you're a pro-Russian, this is what Russia has successfully used in and around Kursk. They've moved into the sewers, into the subways, and come up behind Ukrainians that way and taken a lot of territory. So if you're a pro-Russian, I mean, this, you should be well aware of this. So yeah, moving into an urban environment is deadly as hell. And even take a look at here. If you move in here, then you have to, this could be buildings, this could be rooms, this could be streets, corridors, windows, you name it. So you move in here and you think you're safe. You may move in troops here to secure this, whatever this is. And all of a sudden the enemy comes in this way, cuts you off. They could come down this way and you end up in a firefight here. And you may have secured this area, and all of a sudden the enemy comes through here without you knowing about it, because they have found a way to sneak through, and they are now behind you and you are in serious trouble. So all of this combined is why they say you need a 10-to-1 advantage fighting in an urban environment. So if you have 10,000 Ukrainians in a city or a town, Russia would need 100,000 troops to win that fight. Right, so pay attention now if you are a pro-Russian. Ukraine is in control of Sucha. Ukraine has pushed out this far. They are apparently holding Martinovka. The Russian forces are in this valley here, but Ukraine is in Martinovka. So say Russia wants to or Russia will or want to eventually attack Sudzha. What does Russia have to do? They have to cross wide open fields. Remember all the drones, artillery, missile strikes attacking pre-sighted locations. This is what I'm talking about. If Russia crosses here, they will get schwacked like you wouldn't believe, like we've seen time and time again all along the front line. After this, right, suburbs, prepared defenses, all the concrete buildings, all the wooden buildings, everything. This is prepared defenses. This is where you need a 5-on-1 advantage. If they're pushing through here, you enter forested areas, rivers, valleys. This is where they need a 3-to-1 advantage, right? Preferably, if possible. But say they push through here in Russia, they get across here. Drones have schwacked dozens of vehicles. Russia pushes in, needs a 5-to-1 advantage, loses hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand troops taking this part here. What is this? This is a valley with a river. And that means bridges. And what are bridges? Choke points, right? And so you have to fight your way through these choke points. And then you have Sudzha and Goncharovka, right? 10-to-1 advantage is what you need fighting down here. And I mean, the river itself, Chasiv Yar, Russia has struggled with Chasiv Yar because there's a river. Russia has struggled at Vovchansk because there's a river. And now you have Sudzha with a river. You have suburbs, wide open ground. I mean, and you gonna have a couple of thousand Ukrainians here. Not all 10,000, but a couple of thousand holding this area. I mean, even if you are pro-Russian, you realize that Russia will need vast amounts of troops to pull this off. So with all this in mind, how many men will Russia need to push back the potentially 10,000 Ukrainians in Kursk Oblast? What does Russia need to win in the valleys and in the forests? What does Russia need to win out in the open farmland? What does Russia need to win in the town of Sudzha and the surrounding settlements? What does Russia need to win if Ukraine builds trenches? Russia lost 47,000 troops at Avdiivka, dead and wounded. And Russian commentators are worried that Sudzha will become another Avdiivka. Ukraine has roughly 10,000 troops in Kursk. Russia has so far deployed between 5,000 and 10,000 troops to counter the incursion, potentially enough to halt Ukraine's advances into Russia. But Russia needs at minimum 20,000 troops to force Ukraine out of Kursk Oblast. But since Ukraine holds larger towns and settlements, it seems more likely that Russia needs closer to 40,000 or 50,000 troops to achieve success. At Kharkiv, Russia has some 45,000 to 50,000 troops. Will Russia give up on the Kharkiv front to ensure operational success in Kursk Oblast? The reporting seems to suggest that this is the case, and if Russia weakens the Kharkiv front, that opens up for Ukraine to force Russia out of the Kharkiv Oblast. Fact is that Ukraine still has the advantage, for the time being at least. Ukraine has invaded Kursk with mechanized formations supported by assault units. Russia has so far deployed motorized infantry to counter this. This gives Ukraine an advantage in armor, mobility and firepower, as well as aggression. Motorized infantry in trucks and APCs usually deploy troops 300 to 400 meters from the fighting, and then the troops walk into combat. Meanwhile, mechanized formations and assault units in infantry fighting vehicles such as mortars, Bradleys, BMPs, they actually drive straight up to the enemy positions and deploy anywhere between 50 to 0 meters from the enemy positions. So they can actually deploy straight into combat if needed. and so much more aggressive, and as a consequence, much more mobile, because you don't have to stop 300 meters from the enemy. You can actually move around as needed close to the enemy positions and deploy troops when it's most tactically advantageous. And on top of that, Ukraine could potentially have a 2-on-1 advantage in manpower in the area, with their 10,000 going up against potentially 5,000 Russians. So despite Russian reinforcements finally arriving, it could potentially still not be enough to prevent Ukraine from conducting maneuvers. But all that said, Russian reinforcements will pour in over time over the next coming days, and obviously as that happens, Ukraine will not be able to maneuver and will not be able to expand, and they will more than likely be forced to concentrate on defending what they've gained so far. And at that point, Russia will begin to make moves on Sudzha, and then we'll see if Sudzha becomes another Bakhmut, another Avdiivka. And well, that is why Ukraine still has the advantage. And I hope you found it interesting. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine. Give them hell.